It's time for Reason.
Because now we're introducing the one thing that we have that can actually change the mentality of the people that we're trying to influence, and that is capitalism. We can change their diplomacy. We can change their leaders. We can overthrow the dictators. We can try and quote-unquote free the people, but unless the people know what to do with that freedom, they're lost. The one way that we can change things is introduce capitalism.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I'll get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
Is it Wednesday already? Can you believe it? Welcome into the Voice of Reason, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation. Here in Wichita, Kansas, on the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM. I cannot believe it's Wednesday already. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. It is the pre-Friday celebration. It is a hashtag freedom-loving Wednesday. Can you believe it? Welcome into the Voice of Reason right here on the Big Talker, KQAM. By the way, simulcasting on KGPT TV, channel 2610. We do a rebroadcast of it from 6 to 9 in the evening, so you get to wake up with me. You get to go to bed with me. Per se. Welcome into it. 316-721-8255. 316-721-TALK. If you want to join into the program, we'd love to hear from you today. Ladies and gentlemen, the big news of the day, of course, come on, we got to start off with this, right? We got to start off with it. The big news, of course, the man himself, off the ballot in the state of Kansas.
Well, of course, I believe that I paved the way for Donald Trump. I've brought ridiculousness to politics, and he saw an opening, and he jumped on in there.
There you go. Vermin Supreme with the fighting the oral and moral decay of the United States, wanting to give the free ponies to everybody in the United States, wanting to harvest the zombies and harness them for their energy, for alternative energy with massive hamster wheels dangling meat out in front of them. Vermin Supreme, who was a candidate for the Attorney General's office for the state of Kansas, has officially been removed from the ballot in the state of Kansas. And this isn't the first one that's actually happened. If you know that we have been trying to work on fighting some of the candidates potentially signing up to run for office in the state of Kansas, where you have to be a legal resident of the state of Kansas. That has not been in the state constitution as of yet. It will be on the state constitution by the next legislative session, but they have removed him, as they removed. Now, of course, he made the statement that we were scared of him and we were really concerned about him and we were really terrified of him and he was going to win the election. And yet, of course, they go down this road, which is what they always do when they end up getting removed. But it's the same thing that we did to the New Yorker, who is running for governor for the state of Kansas this year as well, and removed him from the ballot. And the same reason that we tried to actually set an age limit and an age requirement for running for governor in the state of Kansas. So the Republicans, they did end up removing Vermin Supreme from trying to challenge Derek Schmidt in a Republican primary when it comes to the Attorney General's position. It is the big, of course, breaking news, and everybody's all in a panic about it. Yep. That's right. Everybody's all up in arms. How dare you remove Vermin Supreme from the Attorney General's election in the state? So I guess the joke's over. It was fun while it lasted. We were going to try and get him on the program just because it would have been entertaining to talk to him. It's one of those spectator events to where you know he's not going to win. You don't take him seriously in any way, shape, or form. But still, you're kind of intrigued by what he's going to do. I mean, when you walk around with a tooth fairy costume with a big rubber boot on your head, then you kind of wonder what... what kind of legal expertise that the individual actually has to run for Attorney General. Now, if you remember when he actually came to the state of Kansas, the day of the deadline in order to be able to register and file to run for office, and he held his press conference, he did say that he wanted to run for Attorney General because of a mistreatment of a pony in the state of Kansas and wanted to rectify that situation through the legalities of what we have with the state government, and that was the whole purpose of running for Attorney General. So that joke is over, and we can get back to regular business, except, of course, the Democrats that are doing other shenanigans throughout the state and the whole Ron Estes deal in the primaries here in the 4th Congressional District and some of the other ridiculousness that's happening in the state. But nonetheless, Vermin Supreme is out, is done, is over, according to KWCH as of yesterday. The state, or 2 days ago, the State Objections Board says the boot-wearing, pony-loving politician satirist who runs for president every 4 years, won't be on the ballot for a Kansas attorney general. The board voted to remove him because his primary address is still in Massachusetts. So he goes off there. Maybe he'll save a pony or two on his way out, and that one's all said and done. The hard-breaking news of the day. Now you know Vermin Supreme no longer running for attorney general in the state of Kansas. I was a little bummed. Would have been kind of fun just to see him on there, at least for a little bit more. I mean, it was just the entertainment value of that. Not going to win, not going to do anything, not going to go anywhere, but still for the entertainment value. There you go. 316-721-8255. We have a lot to get to today, talking about not the California, but the primaries that happened yesterday. 5 states had primaries, and guess what? More Donald Trump supporting Republicans ended up winning their nominations in the Republican primaries in all 5 of these states. Is that any bit of a shocker to you? We'll talk about that in a little bit. Plus, a big piece of news coming out of California is California it's going to be on the ballot this year officially to split the state into 3 separate states. Now, I saw this story, and I got really excited thinking this is a really, really good piece of news, and I was really excited about it. Not necessarily excited how they're breaking up the state into the 3 states. We'll talk about that a little bit as well and get your thoughts on that. Plus, a lot of things happening locally. It's going to be a big day today. Coming up, we have Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell on the show, 7:30, as we always do for a Wednesday. In the 8 o'clock hour, Professor Scott Brown, he is with the Agricultural Department for the state for the University of Missouri. He's going to join us and talk to us about some of the trade deals going on when it revolves to agriculture. We'll talk about the Farm Bill, and then, of course, some of the trade and the tariffs being placed on certain goods coming in and going out of the country. So we have a big show today, heck and a half of a show, and you're not going to want to miss any part of that. 316-721-8255. Let's go ahead and kick off this morning with a phone call, shall we? Line number 1. Good morning. What's your name?
My name is Eddie.
Good morning, Eddie. How are you, sir?
Sir, would you give me permission to speak about the city council meeting and the individual and your council member that you had on yesterday?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the city council meeting because I did want to touch on that a little bit today. It sounds like it got a little heated yesterday, didn't it?
Well, okay. As you know, I've been watching these for years, and I think, first of all, Brandon Johnson is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city council member. He's not an extremist or anything like that. He's just a very sincere man. And they did have a lot of individuals that spoke to the positive of opening that swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was only 1 or 2 people that went up there and spoke that really didn't have any business being up there. Some lady went up there with an anti-Wichita Police Department T-shirt, spoke on opening the pool. She was a white lady, I don't know. But anyway, the real fact is, okay, that they had a pool up there, but the attendance was so low.
Sure.
That now, if you go to the south part of Wichita, the Osage swimming pool was closed, and it turned into a splash pad. Also, on the same property was the Osage Recreation Center. The city also closed it. And so there are pools being closed all over Wichita, and it has nothing to do with race. And what they did, and I would advise them, first of all, to go up there and thank the city council for what they have been doing for them up there. But they went up there and they kind of blasted them. And Jeff Blueball really got ticked off. You could say, seriously. I mean, he got angry.
Sure.
Okay. And Jeff Longwell, he wasn't too happy, and neither was Pete Meitzer,
Mm-hmm.
And Brian Fry, a beautiful person, he looked at it from just a businessman's point of view, and it just didn't make sense to invest $4 million into that swimming pool when it wasn't used that much. After you're going to invest $4 million, invest $4 million.
And that's just for the building of it. That doesn't even include the maintenance thereafter, if there's any issues or just to be able to maintain, keep it going. Yeah, that's just the building to get it going.
Right. So the bottom line is that it wasn't used. It
Sure.
had nothing to do with race or anything like that. And it looks like the one there at Edgemore and Central is the one that's going to be possibly going to have a new pool there.
Well, and that's yeah, and you're right. I mean, they were the two that they were looking at, and that was a big possibility of that. Now, that's the one that I live right near, is that Edgeborne Central, and I know that was the big talking point. But again, they're going to have to really bulldoze the current one there and start from complete scratch, because that's the one that was losing. What do you say? Over a foot of water a day in that pool right there at Edgemore. So they're going to have to do a lot of reconstruction on that, and it's going to cost a lot of money.
Right, and And if you really look at the city of Wichita, and what they say up there is that they lost to Walmart. Well, Walmart's closed all over Wichita, the neighborhood Walmarts. And as far as Quick Trip closes, opens, closes. I mean, they jump around every 3 years. So it has not. But I just get a little upset when people think that it's just strictly race.
No, throw out the race card and it sounds good. You're absolutely right. I mean, it has nothing to do with race. It's strictly a budgetary issue. And the fact that if we're going to build a bunch of pools, it's going to cost $4.5 million. There are a few that are running right now, as we talked to Brian Fry about yesterday. And actually, we're going to have Brandon Johnson on the show on Friday this week as well, because he's my city council member for 1st District up there in the Northeast corner. And it's been a while since we've had him on the show, so we're going to talk to him and kind of do a recap of the meeting as well and get some more information. But you're right. I mean, I was in favor when we started talking about this last year during the elections. It sounded good to have the public community pool, and everything sounded great. And, we need to have it. And it's been, kind of the tradition for the communities, and it's easy access for everybody that may not have the memberships to the Y or that sort of thing. And it sounded really great. But at the same time, when you really start looking at the budget, which you and I is ones that, are concerned about our tax money, is concerned about government spending, are concerned about these projects, are we really willing to sink in $4 to $4.5 million on a single pool just to build it, and then for the maintenance of, and hope that there's enough people that are actually going to go on a consistent basis in order to offset the cost and actually hopefully be able to pay it off in the long term by people actually showing up to these things? Is it really financially viable for the city, or is it one of those like we had talked about earlier last week when, times are changing, things are evolving, students don't even necessarily look at analog clocks anymore, but looking at digital clocks sort of thing, and maybe the city pools is something that's kind of going to the wayside because it's not economically viable and just people aren't going to them anymore.
But they closed Osage Pool.
Sure.
And they closed Osage Recreation. And so it has nothing to do with race. But anyway, it's I just wanted to say that I thought the 99.99% of the citizens that appeared there were just very, very fine people, but the bottom line is it just does not make economical sense.
I completely agree. Eddie, I appreciate the call, my friend. I want to sneak in one more before a break here, but appreciate it very much. You're right, and it's so easy to throw out the race card. Oh, it's an interesting community. It's a different area, and we're taking away the opportunity for them. It's just not economically viable, pure and simple. And if that's not it, then we have to look at that. We cannot keep throwing the race card out just because we can throw the race card out. And that is a little frustrating, and it does get on people's nerves because it is starting to get a little old. No matter what argument you have, the race card always seems to get thrown out there. It has nothing to do with that. It's whether the city can actually afford it and whether we want to pay our taxpayer money for something like that. And $4.5 million is a heck of a lot of money. Actually, I saw some of the budget sheets, and we spend $4.5 million on the upkeep of all the golf courses in the area that are owned by the city. And I mean, that's all of them. And that's really not bad for all of the golf courses, as opposed to $4.5 million for one city pool. Just for the building of, again, not for the maintenance of. So a lot of discussion to go into that, and I'm glad they had that. It did sound, it was pretty heated. I got to see some of that on the video, and I may have to go back and watch the rest of it. I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but did get to watch some of it. And there were some great, healthy, fired up, passionate conversations when it came to the pool. 316-721-8255. Let's go back to the phones. Line number 2. Good morning. What's your name?
This is Jim.
Good morning, Jim. How are you, sir?
I'm just doing real well, except for a muscle cramp in my leg. It woke me up an hour or two ago.
Uh-oh. Well, that ain't good.
I have a comment on the splitting Kansas into 3 states.
You mean California?
Oh, I thought it was Kansas.
No, California. God, no.
But let's say they split Kansas up, This is with my tongue firmly in my cheek on both sides.
Okay.
We could name, of course, we'd keep Kansas for part of it. We'd also have trash can and Mexican.
All right, so where would these areas be then?
Well, that would be everywhere.
Okay, it would just.
Everybody would get to decide which state they lived in, but they can stay where they're living now.
But I mean, geographical location. Oh, so they just get to decide no matter where they're at in the state.
It's like
okay.
picking your sex.
There you go. Well, see the identity. It's the state identity of what state you actually want to identify as. I like that. Oh, there you go. That's fantastic right there.
Morning.
I love it, Jim. Appreciate it very much. Hey, I mean, I guess if you can choose your identity when it comes to your gender, you can choose the state that you live in, no matter where geographically you may actually be living in. I identify as an Ohioan while I sit here in the Kansas border, but no, I am actually going to abide by Ohio rules. I could see someone actually trying that. Just go to California, go to Colorado, and you'll get somebody that'll actually try to make that argument, because if they can choose their identity, then they can choose what rules they actually choose to live under. It all makes sense now. Jim, you're on to something. It actually makes sense now. Democrats and progressives don't want to live under the rule of law of the United States. They self-identify as a communist that wants to live under Kim Jong-un's rule of North Korea and live by those rules as opposed to living by our rules. It makes total sense now. Again, probably why they don't like Donald Trump infiltrating where their safe space is of North Korea. Ha! 23 minutes past the hour to Wednesday. Stay here.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Minutes past the hour. Welcome back into the Voice of Reason. Big news when it comes down south of the border, as in south of Kansas's border. Oklahoma coming up with revenues higher than projections down there for the first time in a long time. We'll talk about that when we come back from out after the break. Got some a lot of calls lining up on the phone lines as well. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Don't hang up. We'll get to you as soon as we come back. Open up the next break with you on your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to self-identify as something completely different and live in a completely different state and abide by those laws. Why? Because I can and because I self-identify. It really makes sense, doesn't it? It really opens your eyes to the mentality of someone who just feels like they can do whatever they want to, and if they just choose to live by somebody else's rules, then they want to. It kind of is like, the teenage child trying to learn to become an adult and trying to learn to grow up and kind of do their thing, and then the parents telling them, no, well, I'm going to do whatever I want to. Well, if you live under our roof, then you're going to abide by our rules. Well, fine. I don't identify as living under your roof. I identify as living under someone else's roof. I see it. Got some calls on the line. Don't go anywhere. We'll get to you as soon as we come back. Got to take a bottom of the hour break. Lots to get to today. It's going to be a fun hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday right here on The Voice of Reason. Stay tuned.
Hear me screaming, see me bleeding, 'cause the days no more the same. Will I see me falling, get down and
Time for Reason.
Now, if a Republican all of a sudden, worried about an election, comes around and starts wavering on his principles and says, okay, I'm going to give that amnesty, would that soften your heart to the Republican? Or would you say, yeah, that's nice, great, thanks. That's one less thing that we actually have to address when we're in power, and I'm still going to vote for the Democrat.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
That's the way we roll. Welcome back into the Voice of Reason. Happy hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday. As we move right along, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, waking you up the best way we know how to do so, which is the right way. Interpret that one however you may see. This is not a PC-friendly zone, and we just get you more pumped up than a cup of coffee, a shot of espresso, even an energy drink. Let's go right to the phone, shall we? 316-721-8255. By the way, Facebook Live feed up and rolling as well. Go on there, say good morning to me, like it, share it. We'd love to hear from you. I saw one comment, freedom, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Let's go to the phones. Line number 1. Good morning. What's your name?
Hey, happy hump day.
Hey, good morning, sir. What's going on?
Well, I got to take you to task for saying we shouldn't spend that much money on a pool. Let's look at, Edgemore Pool. You and I both live near there.
Mm-hmm.
You fix that pool, you're going to take your girls over there and swim.
Once in a while. But also I have a YMCA membership, so if I'm going to go swimming, then I'd probably go there anyways.
True. Now, ask yourself, how much money have we spent on downtown garages that other people get the revenue off of? How much money have we spent on statues all around downtown?
Sure.
That, they're aesthetically pleasing, but good Lord, I was doing fine before I had a little water spraying downtown. How much money have we spent on the Riverwalk? And look at all of the money we've spent downtown and we've spent in other parts of the neighborhood. Now, when it was open, I don't know the attendance figures, but there were always lots of kids at Edgemore Pool.
Sure.
And to me, it just seems like, well, I can't disagree with a lot of the speakers. I wouldn't say the race card, but I would say the neighborhood card.
Sure.
I mean, downtown's getting tons of money. Who lives down there? People who can afford $1 million condos.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know that a couple of the city pools, what they do is not necessarily like a homeowners association, but the community itself has agreed to, within that community, to raise its own taxes a little bit in that area in order to be able to fund it and keep the maintenance and up and going. That way is kind of a community thing that they've openly agreed to do. So would you be in support of something like that for, say, Edgemore?
Actually, I would.
Okay.
Because I think it is a benefit. It does benefit what they would call economic zone. So yeah, it's reasonable that we pay something towards the maintenance. And I don't think we ought to pay. I don't think we ought to pay to put a new pool in. I think it's lack of maintenance. If you didn't all of a sudden start losing a foot of water a day, you had to have noticed that things were going wrong, and we've got plenty of time when the pool's closed to pull it, to empty it, maintain it, do whatever needs to be done. I think it's like too many things around the city that are government. You do it, and then you neglect it, and then you say, "Oh, it's a terrible shape. We're going to close it."
Right. No, I agree. And look, I mean, I'm all for investing in communities in order to try and make things better. I think it needs to be a little bit economically viable, and I totally agree with you when it comes to that there's a lot of expenditures that I think that we can cut that should be very easy for us to cut at the city level in order for us to get back on track a little bit, because the budget is a little tight. And as we're looking at expanding other areas like law enforcement, like Brian Fry had mentioned, and a few other things, upgrades that we need for some of our utility programs, that we need some of the funds available, and I'd rather be able to cut elsewhere in order to compensate for that, as opposed to raising taxes or any kind of additional spending. So it's whether we agree that a pool or that a community like that needs an investment of that magnitude from the city. And you said that you would agree with that. And I want to get to another call here, so I appreciate the call. You said that you would agree with that, even by a community local tax hike marginally, hopefully not too terribly much, but a tax hike to some degree just in that community in order to offset some of the costs and be able to maintain that pool. I don't know if I would like that. I mean, I totally see it, and I think that if we're going to, it would be better to do it at the local level as opposed to the redistribution from the entire city sort of thing in order to invest in it. So, I mean, that is definitely a better idea. I just don't know that I would like that. I would prefer, honestly, to go the cheaper route, spend $50,000, $60,000 and go for the splash pad, still have something in the community, have some type of entertainment and excitement for the kids to be able to go and play, and then have us go kind of the cheap route, because I'm kind of a cheapo like that. And it's not because of the community. It's not because of a race card. It's not because of anything. It's just because I'm so much against a lot of government spending that I just don't want to invest that kind of money. That's a lot of money. Again, every golf course that we have in the entire city area that the city owns, the total maintenance is close to $4 million, as opposed to one pool in one community being $4 to $4.5 million. That's a lot of money. And as we're talking about a water filtration system that we have in the city that Brian's talked about, that was manufactured and built in the 1950s, that's getting to be a little inefficient. Things are starting to break down on it, and we need to actually improve that system. That, to me, is more important than a pool. When we talk about, you're right, I mean, some of the statues, why do we need to build more statues sort of thing? Why do we need to build some of that? It's nice if we have a surplus of revenue that we can actually utilize with that. But right now, I just don't know if that kind of stuff's economically viable. But I appreciate the call. Appreciate your input very much so. 316-721-8255, line number 2. Let's go back to the phones. Good morning. What's your name?
Scott.
Hey, what's going on, Scott?
Well, I mean, anytime the city doesn't do anything that's not serving itself or the county, then it becomes controversial and it becomes open, like bicycle trails. I mean, they got these bicycle trails all over the city. I don't remember them opening that for debate, and they don't get used very much. I haven't seen 10 bikes in one row anywhere.
Thank you.
But see, that's okay. They can do that, and nobody can say anything about that because for some reason that was something they wanted to do. When it comes to shooting fireworks over there for the River Festival, that's okay because that's something they wanted to do. But now when you want to shoot something for 4th of July, oh, wait a minute, we got to open that debate. That's controversial. We can't do that. But see, somehow, lighting a firecracker is just as easy for me to do it as for that guy to do it. But for some reason, because it's in their interest, is in making their special interest people money, then, well, it's okay for us to shoot firecrackers, and it ain't open to debate. When it comes to what you call that, raising money for the law enforcement, well, that's okay because we're going to find that money. We're going to take it out of the development of some other community. Now, we're not going to try to get jobs in that community. We're just going to try to put more police in that community because that's more in our interest.
Well, let's go on one issue at a time here because I totally 100% agree with you, 110% agree with you when it comes to the bike lanes. I think bike lanes on roads are, and I've gotten flack for this too. I think it is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I've seen it in other cities, and it drives me nuts. There is something called a sidewalk, and if you're not a motorized vehicle, if you are walking or you are biking, then you belong on the sidewalk. That's my personal opinion. It is very easy to be able to make a sidewalk. I mean, in our first district up on that part of the town in near the Edgewater area, we've gotten some new sidewalks in on many of the new streets, and it is very easy for an individual who wants to bike rather than walk or rather than ride their car or whatever, drive their car, to be able to bike on the sidewalk. And you're out of people's way. All you have to do is look out for pedestrians, which is the same as if you'd be riding the bike on the side of the road. And then cars do not have to worry about running into a bicyclist while they're on the side of the road or riding down the middle of the road. It drives me nuts. And I know that a couple of years ago in the city budget, they were talking about doing a $300,000 expansion on bike lanes for downtown. And I am yet to see anybody actually use them. Maybe I'm not there at the right times. But it's summertime right now. I was just downtown actually yesterday. I saw 0 people on the bike lanes. I don't know why that we want to invest money on something like that when we have something called sidewalks for people to ride their bikes on. And I totally agree with you on there. When it comes to the fireworks, I agree with you completely there as well. I think that people should have the right to be able to fire off their fireworks for 2 nights a year, which is 4th of July and New Year's. Let people fire off the fireworks, fire off the big ones, have a good time, have a big extravaganza. And now, I mean, I have no problem with the city investing in a fireworks show because it is a entertainment value for the people who may not want to fire them off or don't live in an area where they don't feel that they need to or whatever the case is. They're close enough. They can see them from the Lawrence Dumont Stadium or see them from some of the stadiums where we do end up firing off. So I have no problem with the city investing in it and allowing to do that. But I think that they should allow us to do that as well, whether it is a confined area for the safety procedures or whether it is just for a time frame within the city. But I think that we should be able to have that right to fire them off. So I'm totally in agreement with you on both of those issues.
Well, see, the city and the county are overstepping their boundaries because it's the people who decide what needs to be and what don't need to be. But see, they're trying to make it to where they're, police stating us. And see, we got to vote out a lot of these people because right now they're trying to make a police state of this area. And if we don't stop them, then it's going to be just like goose stepping around here.
Well, what I will say is I know that they want to hire close to 80 more law officials, law enforcement agents, or police officers in the Wichita City area. And if they do, my only stipulation is that if they do that, if they feel the need that they really need 80 more officers on the streets, then we need to find a way to do it to where we're not taking money necessarily from community investment or that sort of thing, but we're not raising taxes or we're not increasing spending. If they're able to move things around and shift things around in order to allow that to happen, then I'm okay with that. If not, then we need to act like any other personal budget to where we're on a restraint where we want to expand the house and put a third floor on the home, but we just don't have the money to do so at the time, so we're not going to do it.
Or there's no job development program. What's the job development program? I'm not hearing anybody saying anything about that.
Well, they are working on some.
They get rid of jobs. They know how to get rid of jobs, but they don't develop anything.
Well, I mean, we are working on job development. We have seen some stuff come in. I see that more of a statewide issue to where, I mean, we're doing the best we can at the local front, but unless there's a state initiative with state tax rates that are extremely high and the incentive for businesses to be here, then no matter what the local city does, there's not going to be any benefit or positive growth from that until the state actually gets their stuff in gear. So really, we can only do the best we can on that front.
Yeah, they can still bring police in, though. They can do that. They don't have any problem getting that in.
Well, and again, and I got to take a break.
If they need some help, why don't they ask the public to help them to come up with a program for developing jobs? I mean, because there's got people out here who know what to do, and they can do that.
Sure. Scott, I appreciate it. I got to take a break here, but no, I mean, I get what you're saying. The city can do the best it can, and I'm not going to put any pressure on the city for saying, oh my gosh, you didn't double the job growth here in the city compared to last year, sort of thing. I mean, we can do the best we can at the local front, and we can try to incentivize businesses for being here. But again, unless the state tax rates for individual income, for property tax rates, for business taxes, business incentives, until that actually gets better in the state, which it doesn't sound like it's going to anytime soon, because our lawmakers in Topeka still continue to want to increase taxes retroactively. But I mean, just imagine if you're a business wanting to come to the state of Kansas and wanting to look at maybe Sedgwick County or the Wichita City area to bring your business, bring another 50 to 100 jobs, reinvest and start over and kind of move to this area. When you look and say, all right, what's the incentive for me to do so? And you see that last year the state government passed a retroactive tax increase on individuals and on businesses and said, oh, yeah, you know what, whatever tax rates you have may not be locked in and secured for the year because halfway through the year we're going to increase that, and then you're going to be viable and you're going to be responsible to be able to pay for that compensation for the last 6 months of that. So, your business structure and your business model and what your outlook is for the year is going to change based on what the politicians in Topeka end up doing. To me, that's going to put up a big red flag and say, you know what, maybe I'm not going to invest in the state or in the city of Wichita. Maybe this isn't the place for me to go because I don't know what the politicians are going to make me do with my business. To me, that's a big red flag, and I'm sure it is going to be for many businesses as well. So until we get that in order, no matter what the city does, they can do the best they can. And we've seen some growth come in, which is good. But until we actually fix things at the statewide level, the city's going to have their hands tied on what they're actually able to do to be able to bring in growth and see some of the job growth on that front. Got to take a break. 10 minutes at the top of the hour. Great conversation, though. Great phone calls. And I know I'm in the minority when it comes to the bike lanes. I get it. It sounds like I'm in the minority when it comes to the fireworks as well. I get it. But that's the way I see it. Let us do our own thing. And by the way, keep your damn bikes out of the way of my car. This is the Voice of Reason. Stay here.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
5 minutes at the top of the hour. Welcome back into the Voice of Reason. Appreciate all the phone calls, conversations. Having a lot of fun today on a hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday. I do want to touch on real briefly before we wrap up hour number one as we dip down into the Oklahoma area. According to the Associated Press and USNews.com, Oklahoma, as you know, has been struggling pretty bad. They've been losing month over month over month over month when it comes to tax receipts, when it comes to the economy. They've been struggling. And then, of course, they had the teacher walk out during the time saying, oh, we know that the state's actually struggling economically right now, but we want raises and we're going to shut down all the schools in order to do so because it's all about us. and everything that we want. It's very fascinating to watch what's happening down there. But for the first time in a long time, state finance officials say collections to Oklahoma's main operating funds exceeded the monthly estimate by nearly 20%. Holy cow. That is wild. The Office of Management and Enterprise Service reported Tuesday that collections to the General Revenue Fund in May totaled nearly $500 million, almost $82 million more than expected. The OMES director said lower than expected corporate and personal income tax refunds are partially responsible for the spike. The gross production tax on oil generated $35 million last month, nearly 130% above the estimate. What does that tell you? That tells you that the economy's coming back. That tells you that the oil and gas industry is coming back, which is going to help Kansas too, by the way. And we'll have those numbers, I'm sure, pretty soon as well. But we're doing good. Trump economy, what? The lower taxes, the lower regulations, the economy's ticking up, and even some of the states like Oklahoma that have been struggling for a long time, they're starting to do well. So word to the wise to all of the politicians in the state of Kansas that are looking to run for office and go back to Topeka or to go to Topeka for the very first time, let's take this into consideration. Oklahoma, they've been struggling for a really long time. They've cut, and they've tried to look at what taxes to raise on the back end minimally in order to compensate for what they have to do for their budget. We've gone the different direction, and guess what? Because they've kept their taxes as low as humanly possible, they're starting to see the economy come back. They're seeing their economy tick back up. They're seeing their economic growth. They're seeing the benefits of the tax cuts. It took some delayed time, but that's what the economy does. They're seeing it actually happen. We're not seeing it yet. We're still staying stagnant. Yeah, we have a low unemployment rate. Yeah, we've seen it's revenues higher than projections for 8 or 9 or 10 months straight. But that's because they raise taxes, don't change the equation on what they're actually going to anticipate what's coming in, and then they say, oh, look, our projections are actually off right now, and we're seeing more money come in. It has nothing to do with the fact that we're actually growing the economy the way that we could potentially be growing it. That we're actually seeing small business grow and expand, that we're actually seeing people move to the state. We're not seeing any of that. And it's because we took a different route than they do. I guarantee you in the next few years, if this trend continues, Oklahoma is going to be better off than Kansas. Financially. Just saying. Because we raised taxes. We didn't cut any of our spending. They did. They're seeing growth, and we're still staying stagnant. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe we should start actually allowing the private sector to do what it does best instead of the government trying to control it. Hour number 2, The Voice Reason, coming up. Stay here.
It's time for Reason.
Because now we're introducing the one thing that we have that can actually change the mentality of the people that we're trying to influence, and that is capitalism. We can change their diplomacy. We can change their leaders. We can overthrow the dictators. We can try and quote-unquote free the people, but unless the people know what to do with that freedom, they're lost. The one way that we can change things is introduce capitalism.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
That's what I'm talking about. Welcome into The Voice of Reason, hour number 2 of The Voice of Reason, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation, right here on the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM, simulcasting on KGPT-TV, channel 2610. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you along today on a hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday. That's what it's all about. 8 minutes past the hour, 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. If you want to join in, we have the Facebook Live feed up and rolling, and then plenty of phone calls if you want to call in and chat as well. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, Jim Howell, Sedgwick County Commissioner. We have him on every Wednesday. Last week, as you know, kind of a heated Sedgwick County Commission meeting, if you paid attention to that. It was kind of interesting on what happened. We'll chat with him about what happened last week, along with what's going to happen with the meeting this week. This week, by the way, being the discussion on the vaping laws in Sedgwick County on whether we're going to enforce vaping in public buildings like we do cigarettes. And that's brought some interesting conversation. So we'll touch on that when we have Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell on the line in about 20 minutes from now. So until then, it's open line to you at 316-721-TALK. Plus, in the 8 o'clock hour, we have Professor Scott Brown. He is with the Agricultural Department, Assistant Extension Professor for Agriculture and Applied Economics at the University of Missouri. As we talk about the Farm Bill, we talk about some of the trade and some of the tariffs that are happening right now and how it may affect not only the agricultural community, but the country as a whole. So Professor Scott Brown going to be joining us here in the 8 o'clock hour in just a bit. So really excited about that. So a lot to get to. There's really big news, as that, of course, is the recap of the primaries that happened yesterday, which I do want to touch on briefly. Matter of fact, the pro-Donald Trump candidates winning across the board when it comes to the Republican primaries. We have California that's looking like it wants to split up into 3 different states. Nice concept, stupid way of actually doing it. We'll talk about that and try and squeeze that in here as well, along with Kansas State University, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, ended up paying a student who claimed sexual harassment against a theater professor, ends up getting paid and compensated by KU $200,000. Now, why would you pay a student $200,000? Are you trying to pay off the student? Are you trying to keep the professor? I'm not quite sure yet, but the independent journal World, IJWorld.com, a former University of Kansas student who said his theater professor sexually assaulted him, was the recipient of $200,000 settlement payout by the University of Kansas. Although not admitting wrongdoing, KU paid the sum to the student in exchange for him dropping the federal title lawsuit against the university, according to a confidential settlement agreement signed in August of 2017. Quote, in order to avoid the expense of uncertainty of litigation in this matter, the parties choose to voluntarily enter this agreement. Now, this happens once in a while where you just, you do the settlement outside of court. You don't take it to court because the court could be way more expensive. You settle it, things are done, and you move on. Here's the weird thing, though. Why would you pay the student $200,000 for this just to be quiet and hush-hush and keep it silent? Why wouldn't you just do the right thing? I mean, maybe you compensate them for the fact that, there was a wrongdoing and that they, were treated inappropriately, obviously. And then you fire the professor, obviously, and then you go about your business. Maybe, but $200,000? The Journal World filed an Open Records Act request for documents that would reveal the reason the recipient of the payment, and the newspaper received those documents. As of recently, the Wall Street Journal reported the payment last week on a list of sexual harassment settlement payments made by universities nationwide in recent years. Get this, the student, using the pseudonym John Doe 58, sued KU and the theater professor in March of 2017 in a U.S. District Court in Kansas. At the time the lawsuit was filed, the professor, identified only by initials, was no longer employed by KU. So the professor's not there. Student doesn't want to take it to court. End up settling out of their $200,000. That's your taxpayer money right there. That's either your taxpayer money in some way, shape, or form, whether it's the taxes that we actually pay to higher education, or whether it's the grants that we give them from federal aid, or whether it's the student loans that the students have taken out in order to attend this school that we actually pay by our subsidized money by the federal government. Either way, that is your taxpayer money going to sexual harassment cases. And it happens all over the country. And universities. It happens all over the country when it comes to politicians. It happens all over the country all the time by publicly elected officials or branches like universities or different departments, to where your taxpayer money are going towards litigation. Why would we not? You would think the better way to approach this would be, okay, you got sexually assaulted. We're sorry. Maybe here is a compensation for that, but we're going to deal with it. We're going to fire the professor. We're going to make the professor pay for it. I'm sure, come on, being a college professor, sure, you have, some form of tenure that you were there with. Maybe you repeal that. Maybe you start making them pay it back, and therefore you can transfer the money to the student to make them pay for it. Just saying. But why would the university itself pay $200,000 to a student? Not quite sure what the deal is with that. 316-721-8255. When it comes to the primaries last night, let's take a look at some of the 5 states that actually happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly. South Carolina, Mark Sanford loses to Trump-backed candidate. South Carolina voters forgave U.S. Representative Mark Sanford for his quirkiness, Sanford lost his first election ever Tuesday, beaten by the Republican nomination for another term in the coastal 1st District around Charleston by Katie Arrington, state representative. Less 3 hours before the polls closed, Mr. Trump endorsed Arrington on his Twitter account for the especially personal shot at Sanford. There you go. Pro-Trump candidate, state representative out of South Carolina, wins the primary, beating the incumbent in that race. Virginia, Trump supporter wins GOP Senate nomination. Polls have closed in Virginia's primary. Republican voters are picking up a candidate Tuesday for the U.S. Senate, while Democrats are choosing candidates in the competitive House races. But Corey Stewart, an outspoken supporter of President Trump and Confederate monuments, of course, ABC or CBS News has to throw that in there, won the GOP Senate nomination for that side. The competitor, the establishment, was backed by the state party leaders, ended up losing that race to the pro-Trump candidate in the state of Virginia for the Senate. Remember when we said we had the majority? We need to start cleaning up the party from within now that we have the majority? That's how you do it. Currently held by an establishment Republican, ends up losing in the primary to a pro-Trump, anti-establishment Republican candidate going into the general election. I think that's relatively good news. Blue wave, what? North Dakota, Kevin Cramer wins GOP Senate primary. U.S. Representative Kevin Cramer has defeated a little-known opponent to win North Dakota's Republican primary for U.S. Senate. Cramer easily beat Air Force veteran in that race. Cramer now faces a tougher campaign to unseat Democratic candidate, Senator Heidi Heitkamp in a race as critical for control as closely divided Senate race. Cramer being a pro-Trump candidate. Oh, look at that. Pro-Trump again. Trump-backed candidate wins congressional race in Nevada. Danny Tarkanian has won the Republican primary for Nevada's 3rd congressional district, seat left open by incumbent Democrat who's running against a Senate seat now. That seat open. Pro-Trump candidate wins the primary race in that one. Are you seeing a trend here? Are you seeing a trend in all of these different races? Pro-Trump, pro-Trump, pro-Trump. The establishment tries to run against the pro-Trump candidate, ends up losing. We are on the winning end of this. The Democrats running against Donald Trump, if they run on the platform, which is what they've been doing so far. We don't know any other platform other than we hate Donald Trump. If they run on the platform in the general election of wanting to impeach Donald Trump and reverse Trump policy and raise your taxes again, you will lose. That's the matter of fact. You will lose. That is not going to be a winning ticket in any way, shape, or form because now the Republican Party is the party of President Donald Trump. Some like that, some don't like that. That is the matter of fact, and that's the realism of the situation. Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party at this time. And with what he's doing with the economy, what he's doing to fight on immigration, what he's doing with North Korea, what he's doing with peace, what he's doing with Obamacare, what he's doing with regulations, what he's been doing, people like. Now, I've been very skeptical of populism, as you know. Populism's not been one of my most favorite mentalities or ideologies that I actually like because populism can be very dangerous and is very wishy-washy depending on whatever the flavor of the day is and what people get all heated up about. But right now, on the good front, populism is leading towards more conservative principles. Because that's the flavor of the day. So while it's up to us as the conservatives to ride that populist wave in order to promote our agenda as much as we possibly can, which, by the way, by default will make things better all around the nation, which by default will make people continue to be happy and have that populist mentality stay on the conservative side for a lot longer. That's what we have to do. And it's working. It's working. We've been reading off the primary results for the last 3 weeks now, as there's been a primary almost every week, and every single week, pro-Trump candidate wins. Pro-Trump candidate wins the primary. Pro-Trump candidate wins the primary. And then we talk about the number of people that show up in each of these races, and if the general election vote was held that day, and all of the candidate or all the votes for the Democrats went to one candidate, and all the votes for the Republicans went to one candidate, there would be no switch in any of the seats yet. If the Democrats win any seats, it may be one or two. If the Republicans win any new seats, it may be one or two. But there's really no change. The only changes that we're actually going to see are actually the Republicans going from, I hate Donald Trump, to, oh, okay, let's start working with Donald Trump. Which plays in our favor because we can still maintain a slight majority in both the House and the Senate. A slight majority of Republicans. But the Republicans are going to be fighting against our own party. We're not going to see immigration reform than what we're seeing right now up there, which if you heard the news, there's 2 bills actually now that are going to be floating up there, and they're going to vote on both of them in the House. One of them being very, very pro-amnesty. One of them actually giving amnesty to everybody. I saw a meme on social media, by the way, from Occupy Democrats, which, of course, I liked the page just so I can follow the absurdness that happens in the world today. And they made the comment of, well, Ronald Reagan gave amnesty, and George H.W. Bush gave amnesty, and George W. Bush gave amnesty. And look at that, it's not a partisan thing. Donald Trump's just a racist. And, of course, I had to start the fire, so I made the comment of, well, the only reason they gave amnesty is because Democrats promised that they would seal the border and have it never be an issue again. How'd that work out for us? We're not going to be fooled again by the lies of Democrats not fulfilling their end of the bargain. And, of course, that created the storm of hateful messages towards me, but I don't really care. No more are we going to be lied to. No more are we going to have our own party fighting against us. No more are we actually going to be taken advantage of. It's one of those, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, because we allow that to happen. We've allowed that to happen numerous times throughout the years, and we still haven't learned the lesson. And now we have Republicans that are scared of elections, they don't see the trends. They don't see the fact that the majority of Republicans winning in these primaries across the nation are pro-Trump, pro-immigration enforcement, pro-conservatives that are getting nominated for these primary seats. They don't get it. They're scared of maintaining their seats, so they start wavering. And that happens to everybody. They lose faith in what they believe in. They lose faith in what they're doing. A lot of people do that. It's sad, it's unfortunate, it's heartbreaking, because if you would actually stand on your principles, then you'd be reelected like that, because that's the reason you got elected in the first place, right? Don't worry about the rhetoric from the media. Don't worry about the rhetoric from the opposition trying to scare you and trying to break you down. It's not supposed to work. Don't worry about it. Focus on your principles. And when Republicans begin to waver and get scared, and they end up looking towards Democratic policies that try and make everything all happy and try and give amnesty and trying to feel all loosey-goosey, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. Look at what's happening with these races. I am so excited about this election season because we're going to see so many, not only Republicans win the general election, but conservatives, but Donald Trump populists. We're going to see Republicans, solidly red Republicans, do really great things. And we have a long agenda to get done in there with that because we need to. We need to finish repealing Obamacare. We need to continue to deregulate. We need to finish what's going on with Kim Jong-un. We need to pass national reciprocity when it comes to firearms. We need to build the wall. These things need to be done, and it's not going to be done with the current makeup with anti-Donald Trump Republicans, and it's not going to be done with a majority of Democrats. But the blue wave ain't happening, baby. I've been saying it over and over and over and over again. It's not happening. I don't see it. And I'll eat my words if we end up going into the general election in November and they do end up having a bunch of seats, but it's not going to happen. And by the way, 2 or 3 seats across the nation, if they do end up winning those, is not a blue wave. Is not a blue wave. I feel optimistic. And the fact that all the primaries are pointing towards pro-Trump candidates, not only are we going to defeat the Democrats, but we're defeating the establishment Republicans in the general election as well. I think we should celebrate, my friends. Freedom Loving Wednesday rolls right along as we are excited. We're pumped up. We're ready to go. Let's light that fire for you on a day today so you can carpe diem all over this place, clean it up with a mop, and be able to continue on knowing that you're in safe hands with conservatives around the nation. Got to take a break, 22 minutes past the hour. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
27 minutes past the hour. Welcome back into The Voice of Reason. Great to have you along today on a hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday. Let's get that trending. What do you say? We're pumped up. We're excited. It's hump day. It's the most exciting day of the entire week other than, of course, the greatest day of the week, which is Friday. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. If you want to join into the program, I think that we need to learn a lesson here in the state of Kansas of the fact that we have a very, very loud voice, and I say this all the time, but we have a very loud voice. We have opportunity in order to make people pay attention to us, like we the people, and our state legislator needs to figure that out. I mean, think about this. If we're able to do a pro-Trump movement across the nation with pro-Trump Republican candidates in the election, can't we do the same thing when it comes to pro-actual Republican candidates in the Republican Party for our state legislature? By getting candidates in that are actually conservative, that are actually not even conservative, but just Republican. I mean, I don't mind having someone be maybe 70-80% conservative if they at least hold the Republican values and they don't vote 90% of the time with progressive Democrats wanting to repeal Republican agendas. I would be okay with that. I mean, I get it. I'm not one of the purists. I mean, I like to go as conservative as I possibly can, but I would take that when two of our state elected officials on the Freedom Scale Index scores are actually the worst two in the entire state legislature are Republicans. We have a problem. I'm not even trying to say let's get everybody to be 100% conservative right now. I'm just saying let's at least get Republicans in who openly say they're Republican, that advocate for Republican values, that we don't need something like the Truth Caucus that has to actually tell the Republicans how to vote on conservative principles, when they're the ones sending out the press release saying this is the conservative way to do it. This is the Republican way to do it. If you notice, the mission statement from the Republican Party and the mission statement from the Truth Caucus are the same thing. The exact limited government, less regulation, lower taxes, focus on the private sector. These aren't necessarily conservative principles. They are, but they're the basis of what Republicans believe in. So when you have a bill that comes to your table and you say, we're going to raise taxes retroactively and we're going to spend a heck of a lot more money, goes to $1 billion increase in spending, or we're going to not do that and we're going to cut some of our spending in order for us to be able to skate through until the economy comes up, which one are you going to decide on? And if you have an R in front of your name and you voted for, let's do the retroactive tax increase and raise spending, then we need to go back to Republicanism 101. Not even conservatism, just Republicanism, common sense 101. And right now we've struggled with that. Let's use the same mentality. Let's rally the troops, my friends, across the state of Kansas and make some real changes so we can be one of those benefactors of the Trump economy. We can actually see some of the results coming out of that, because right now we're kind of struggling on that front. Lots more coming up. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
Headline just isn't enough.
Is that all you got?
It's time to wake up the right way.
All right.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker, 1480 AM and 1025 FM, KQAM.
That's the way we roll. That's the way we do things, waking you up better than a cup of coffee, a shot of espresso, an energy drink. It does not matter. We're here for you, starting your day the right way. And you can interpret that however you'd like to do so. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. It's time we do so every single week on a Wednesday at this time. As we love hearing about what's happening at the county-wide level, we do it on Tuesdays with the City Commission or the City Council. And now our Sedgwick County Commissioner, Mr. Jim Howell, back on the line with us. Jim, how are you, my friend?
Well, I'm doing very well, Andy. Good morning, and I've enjoyed the show so far today. It's been
thank you.
Good to know that I'm not dealing with swimming pools today.
I tell you what, that city council meeting yesterday was definitely a very passionate one with the city pools, and you know what? I'm glad that we're having the conversation, because it is something that if a lot of communities really want, then we have to figure out how to do so. Let me ask you something, because this was brought up, and I know that a couple of the city pools end up doing this right now. But if you lived in the community, or in a community that wanted a pool in that vicinity, and the local community around you said, you know what, I'm willing to, for our community, kind of like an HOA, to pay a little bit higher of a tax rate for our area in order to maintain and to make this pool possible, would you consider doing something like that?
Well, of course. I think that's another level of government. In fact, I believe that the state legislature considers that it be a fourth-class government, which is fine. In other words, an HOA actually has statutes that relate to its ability to collect revenue I don't think they would call it taxes in this case because it's paid through dues.
Sure.
But there are certain members, and there's member privileges for being in that in the HOA. And there's other types of benefit districts that have things that they do that have and by the way, the benefit district is a taxing jurisdiction, so they could essentially draw a boundary and then allow the people inside that boundary to choose whether or not they want to be part of a benefit district. And if it passes, and they could be a governing board, they would levy some small amount of tax to provide some type of a service. Now, just my mind runs wild here. I wonder if that was to happen, whether they would be inclusive to allowing others to enjoy that thing that they didn't pay for, because this is, it's always a matter of who paid for it.
Sure.
One of the arguments I think against some of these swimming pools is, well, you're going to tax people across the entire city, and they're never going to go to that pool because they're on the other side of the city.
Sure.
And they feel that's unfair. So if you do it with a benefit district, well, then the opposite argument shows up, which says, well, we paid for this, and what are you doing from across the city? You should pay. In other words, almost like a membership right.
Sure.
To say we paid for it, it's for us. And I think my mind would also say I probably would expect to be a much smaller facility if it was a benefit district led. In other words, these HOAs have very small pools. I'm talking basically almost like a backyard pool.
Right.
But these swimming pools that the city's talking about right now are very large. So, I don't know. I would just in my mind, I think they're like Olympic size in my mind. I'm not sure that's probably accurate, but they're very, very large, and they're very expensive. But they're paid for with city taxes across the entire city. But people on the other side of the city probably will never go there. So,
sure.
It is a very interesting discussion, and I don't really know the answer to the challenge there. But I do think a lot of people have pools, either private sector opportunities, or they pay for it through YMCA or something similar to that. So that's one way a lot of people do that. But it is expensive, and there's a lot of people who are involved in financial challenges that would probably never be able to participate in those things because it is a financial hit to them. So
exactly,
that's where taxes step in, and so this is a very interesting debate. I was listening to part of it yesterday, and I was just thinking that I'm glad we're going to talk about vaping over here, because that's probably minor compared to this McAdams pool issue.
Oh, right. Well, and you're right, and I agree with you. I think that if a local community wants to put in a pool, that's a really good way to go about it. Now, I got to admit, though, I am not a fan of HOAs. I don't like HOAs. I think that's an absurd idea, because I don't want someone telling me what I can do with my own lawn. And if I want to have my redneck toilet flower pot out in the front yard, then by golly, I'm going to do so, and no one's going to tell me otherwise. So I am not.
By the way, I agree with you. My wife and I, we've never wanted to be part of an HOA, so we've always intentionally looked for neighborhoods that did not have that. That's where we've always chosen to live. But
exactly,
those dues are very expensive, and they are very they take a lot of rights away. They tell you exactly what you can and cannot do. Some HOAs are worse than others in that regard, but sometimes they tell you what kind of roof you can have, what kind of paint colors you're allowed to use, and all, whether you can park on the street or not. There's some of them are very restrictive.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. Although my wife is probably cringing at the fact that we're going to have a toilet, a flower pot in our front yard. She may be cringing on that one if she's listening, but you know what? I have the right to do so if I choose to do so. Anyways, let's shift gears to some of the county issues. Before we get into the meeting today, you guys, we thought the city council had a crazy meeting yesterday. You guys had a bit of a passionate meeting on Wednesday last week as well, didn't you? Talk a little bit about what happened.
Well, okay, so we are trying to move towards a decision on an admin building. Just to remind the listeners once again, the way I'd say this is kind of a little bit not exactly accurate, but I say it this way: we're getting kicked out of our own building, which is the genesis of this desire to get a new admin building. And when I say getting kicked out, really, it's not. We're not really getting kicked out, but we are out of space here. The court's need more courtrooms, and that's been clarified by the Kansas Supreme Court, and the DA has stuff stacked to the ceiling, and he's finding it hard to do his job because he has no more space to operate. He needs some space to add some more staff and things like that. There's a lot going on in the county with regards to his responsibilities, and so he needs the space to do his job, and we're just not providing it with our current setup here. And the sheriff has similar problems, and so we're just trying to provide the space that these public safety folks need to do their jobs. And so essentially the answer and the plan has always been for us to move out of this building at some point. We're just at that point now.
Sure.
And so we need a new admin space. And of course, there's a lot of, 5 commissioners. I think we have 5 different opinions. And it's going to be hard to get us, it's kind of like I said last week, herding goldfish or herding kittens. it's hard to get us on one page. And that kind of came up last week a little bit because, the first thing that happened was one commissioner suggested that we go ahead and initiate the musical shuffle by repurposing some space over at the jail so that the sheriff can move from the courthouse to the jail, and his needs will be met, I think, fully. And then the unused space that he just vacated out of the courthouse could be repurposed for the DA, which provides about a 62% solution to the district attorney. Then we also found out that the courts really don't need to have more courtroom space, probably for at least 4 to 6 years potentially. So that's not really an urgent issue. It's just coming. So we had a interesting debate about that idea, but the problem was that that idea has been mentioned in passing, that maybe we should prioritize that stage of this musical shuffle and do that. But it wasn't clear in the agenda that was going to be what our discussion was about, and we went from basically just an idea to a motion to actually begin the implementation of that idea as almost a starting point of our meeting last week. And of course, Commissioner Ranzau made almost a point of order, said that this isn't on the agenda. It's off agenda. We weren't prepared for this discussion. We ought to do this in a staff meeting. By the way, we do have staff meetings every Tuesday. They're open meetings, and we don't vote, but we do give staff direction, by consensus from the commission, and those are also recorded and put on our YouTube channel. But he made a point of order that this isn't the appropriate way to do this. We should just do this at a staff meeting. We can have much more robust discussion, understand it deeply, give staff more clear direction. And he raised that point of order, and I was actually willing to support the motion initially, but I think after his discussion, he swayed me to agree with him. And unfortunately, I guess I'd say from my perspective, unfortunately, the motion passed 3-2. It doesn't really much matter because the motion doesn't have any teeth in it. It simply is declaring, if you will, a first step of our process.
Okay.
So with that first decision, I guess, is technically already made. That was made last week at the meeting on the 3-2 vote. That did make the news. It was very good discussion, but we probably spent, I'm going to say, 45 minutes probably talking about this first little piece of information, and it wasn't even really on the agenda. So that was the first thing that happened. Then, of course, the second thing that happened was there was some. We had a lot more discussion about the 3 options for admin buildings, but during that time, some points were made. I guess I would use the word accusation, but some comments were made I thought were fairly negative towards me. And
there was an accusation in there.
Yeah, those were accusations. He basically made the comment that I was negotiating and doing it basically on behalf of the county, trying to get a better deal and doing it illegally or whatever. And I hate to use those words because those are strong words, but that's what he said. And I had it verified after the meeting that, of course, I did nothing wrong. I even did a Kansas Open Records Act request on my email because this was an email exchange between myself and one of the people who are representing one of the buildings. I asked a couple of clarifying questions on one of the points of their deal. I've been trying to get that answer from staff and wasn't able to get the answer, so I decided kind of last minute to go ahead and just ask the question so I could hopefully get an answer back, which, by the way, I did get an answer back, but in doing that, they felt like I violated a process or policy. So I had verified that through our legal counsel that essentially I did nothing wrong. In fact, I had a right to do exactly what I did do. And by the way, this discussion of negotiation actually never happened. I didn't negotiate anything. I simply asked clarifying questions about the existing offer, and that was the difference. And so we had that disagreement, perhaps, and that may or may not come up again today. We'll see if that happens again today. But when I guess people talk about the city and county not getting along, and maybe some differences of opinion between city and county. Sometimes they may even look at the city yesterday. Council members not getting along with each other during yesterday's meeting. It was interesting to see that happen.
Sure.
But when you have different opinions on a board, that sometimes happens, and of course it happens over here too. And I think we saw that last week. Doesn't mean that we're bad people. We should respect each other. We use the term honorable for a reason. These are my colleagues that were elected to these positions, and I honor them in their role, and I respect them for who they are. But we don't necessarily have to agree on things. But when we do disagree, we should do so respectfully and honestly, and not levy accusations that are based in assumptions or misunderstandings. And
Well,
so
you know what, and
there's like
that's
the
the
problem.
thing. That's the thing. We need to. I mean, nowadays, and it seems to even have infiltrated our local governments, is the fact that now we can't even have a rational debate and discussion. Say, you know what, I disagree with your position, but that doesn't mean that you're a horrible, evil, terrible person. And now it seems like we have accusations going on across the board from to city council members or from county commissioners going at each other. And I made the comment last week when we saw this story that I think that we just need kind of a team building exercise to get all back on the same page and say, look, you can disagree, which is totally fine, and let's have the healthy, robust discussion and debate, but accusing people of stuff really isn't helping the situation in any way, shape, or form.
Well, it might surprise people, but we do have a restriction that some people may not realize or may not remember, but we are not really allowed to have interactive discussion about these issues. So there's a Kansas Open Meetings Act, which is intended that we would have our discussions and our debates and our disagreements in the public in an open meeting. And I think the county's been very true to that. We do a good job of trying to make sure that we, don't go to the back room and kind of work things out and go out there in front of people and just, let them see the conclusion. That would be illegal if we did that. So we don't agree, and I know some of my colleagues don't agree, but if I want to convince them or if they want to convince me, we've got to do that in an open meeting. And so those disagreements, and by the makeup and structure of this board designed by the Kansas law, we want to see those debates and those discussions and those disagreements in public. The public has a right to see that. And so I understand the effort to say, well, let's just go out and work things out behind the scenes, but actually that's not even legal to do so. We can't do that.
Wow.
So these disagreements, by necessity, just have to happen in the open, and that's the way government works. It's called making sausage. Sometimes
Sure.
It's not pretty, but we end up with usually the better policies come forward because we have these public debates.
Well, we get her done. We got a few minutes left. I don't want to run out of time on this, but other than the administrative building, which I know has kind of been the heart and soul of the last few meetings when it comes to the discussion, the other big issue that's coming up today, and we've touched on this as well, but today's going to be the vote on this, so people really need to be aware of it, is, of course, the vaping rules in the county. Are we going to enforce vaping the same way we do when it comes to cigarettes? And from your I know your stance on it. From your perspective of what the county is looking like, where do you think this may, or where do you think we're going to end up with this issue?
So let's clarify a couple of points real quickly. This is an employee policy, and the employee policy currently says that they can use vaping. I call them nicotine delivery devices because they're not cigarettes. It's not smoking tobacco.
Right.
But the policy allows an employee to use those in designated areas if they're odorless. Those are very important points. The listeners need to hear me again. It allows employees to use them in designated areas inside buildings if they're odorless. So this idea we're doing this in front of customers or have an unprofessional appearance, those are not possible, and no one can smell it because it's odorless. These electronic devices that you heard about cotton candy and the Skittle flavors and things like that. Well,
I
that's
kind
not
of like
part
smelling
of
the grape. Come on, I work with a vapor here, Mr. Rick Everett, and it looks like a smoke screen that happens every day. But I smell beautiful grapes every single morning.
Well, some people I understand that, and to me, I enjoy candy flavors, and so it wouldn't bother me at all. But that's not what this allows. This is requires an odorless device. By the way, just to be clear, I'm not a smoker and I'm not a vapor. I've never done either one.
Sure.
So this is not about me. This is about public health and what's good. And let me just remind people once again that every single year in the United States, we have 480,000 deaths on average from cigarette smoking. And there's about 2 million, maybe even 3 million people that are currently suffering and in the process of dying that haven't died yet. COPD, hardening of the arteries, heart attacks, lung disease, all kinds of breathing problems are related to cigarette smoking. So the cigarettes are clearly harmful, and I think anybody who's smoking cigarettes, I would just want to encourage you. There is hope, and I would encourage you to consider your health.
Sure.
On average, a smoker has a 10-year less lifespan on average. That's a significant difference. For every death, I understand there's 30 other people that are in the process of that are suffering from the after effects of actual cigarette smoking. But you look at the vaping, as much as people might not like the way it looks, it's one of these things where if you don't see it and you don't smell it, why do you care?
Sure.
That's kind of my position. If you don't see, you don't smell it, why do you care? The fact of the matter is, if somebody wants to be addicted to nicotine, and by the way, nicotine itself is not a carcinogen. It is a stimulant like caffeine. I drink soda pop. I enjoy it. I like the caffeine in my coffee. I don't know if I'm addicted to it, but let's just say that I like that caffeine. Well, some people smoke, I should say, use e-cigarettes because they want that nicotine.
Sure.
Their bodies crave it, and as you breathe that stuff in, it absorbs that nicotine. Believe it or not, the lungs are amazing. They can exchange oxygen molecules and give off carbon dioxide molecules seamlessly. We don't even realize it's happening, but it's amazing that lungs can do this. So the same way, they can also absorb that nicotine, and you're not exhaling the nicotine. You're exhaling actually water vapor, and that's the difference. And so this idea that secondhand smoke is harmful to others, which is the basis for our smoking bans, that doesn't simply apply to these e-cigarettes, because what's the harm? They'll say, well, there's trace elements, things like nickel. Okay, well, nickel comes from the heating element that turns the juice into the vapor, and the metal that comes off that nichrome wire is where the nickel's coming from.
Right.
It's not like they're not adding nickel to the juice. It's just a process of the heating element itself and air going across the heating element, much like a blow dryer.
Right.
So, this idea that secondhand vaping is going to somehow be harmful to others, there is no data, there is no science to back that up.
Well, it's going to be
it's theoretical, but there is no science to back that up. And by the way, I'm still looking for that first death from e-cigarettes.
Exactly.
There have been some batteries explode. There have been a guy that got popcorn lung because he did something with some buttery flavor in his e-cigarette. And by the way, it was an acute thing. He recovered from it. And if you get lung cancer, you don't usually recover. But this gentleman that got popcorn lung, he did recover. So I'm still looking for the first death of e-cigarettes. And so you need to compare 480,000 deaths per year and millions of people suffering from cigarettes. And then you want to say by policy, this is exactly equivalent to these electronic nicotine delivery devices. I'm sorry, it scientifically doesn't make sense.
Sure, exactly.
We don't ban the patch. Why are we going to ban these things? It essentially has the same impact. By the way, tobacco harm reduction theory and nicotine replacement therapy, NRT or tobacco harm reduction policies ideas. Europe is actually seeing major reductions in heart attacks and lung cancer and smoking related deaths.
Sure.
Because they have actually embraced e-devices as a way for people to get off cigarettes. And they're very successful, by the way, in doing it. About between 50 to 70% successful. People who want to quit smoking can usually stop smoking with these devices. But people who don't use these devices, the success rate's around 7%.
Sure. Well, it's going to be...
So,
we're running late on a break here. We got to take a break.
I'll
it's
let
going to be
you know, yeah.
No, that's all right. It's going to be a heck of a good conversation. I'm glad that people are discussing it. Hopefully, we can get a good vote on that. But Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell, I appreciate the call, my friend. We'll touch in with you again here next week.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, appreciate it right there. Got to take a break. Wrapping up hour number 2. Lots more to get to. This is The Voice of Reason.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker, KQAM.
The conversation with Sedgwick County Commissioner Mr. Jim Howell. They'll have that Sedgwick County meeting today. Make sure and go. Make your voice heard when it comes to the vaping rule. Kind of an interesting conversation to have, and we talk about how things are evolving and times are changing. Well, the new issues arise as well, and this is the new one. Should we have an odorless, non-effective in any way, shape, or form type of smoke be banned by employees because they're trying to stop smoking that could potentially have... I don't know. It's an interesting conversation, and I'm with Jim on this one. I don't think it hurts in any way, shape, or form. I think even with cigarettes, it should be up to the business to choose on its employees and its customers on what it accepts and doesn't accept. But that's another debate for another time. Coming up, hour number 3, Professor Scott Brown from the University of Missouri talking about trade and agriculture. Going to be a fun conversation with him. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
It's time for Reason.
Because now we're introducing the one thing that we have that can actually change the mentality of the people that we're trying to influence, and that is capitalism. We can change their diplomacy. We can change their leaders. We can overthrow the dictators. We can try and quote-unquote free the people, but unless the people know what to do with that freedom, they're lost. The one way that we can change things is introduce capitalism.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
That's what I'm talking about. Welcome into the Voice of Reason, hour number 3 of the Voice of Reason, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation here in Wichita, Kansas, on the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM on TV, simulcasting on KGPT TV channel 2610. It's great to have you along today on a hashtag Freedom Loving Wednesday. That's the way we roll today, starting you off the right way, and you can interpret that however you'd like to. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. If you want to join into the program, you're more than welcome to do so. The Facebook Live feed's up and rolling as well, facebook.com/1480 KQAM. A lot of people signing up for that as well. Just leave a comment, ask a question, call me a jerk. I don't really care. When it's deserved, you can do that. Even when it's undeserved, just wait for the progressives to, come out on the attack, which they do on a daily basis. I want to shift gears here for just a minute as we talk about, of course, Kim Jong-un and the North Korean summit, as we talk about trade and the G7 summit where everybody's all panicky about, Canada. Oh, man. Canada. Whatever will we do with Canada being all upset about us and being upset with us and us putting on tariffs on Canada and on Mexico and trying to get out of the TPP and getting out of NAFTA. And then we see with China, with the tariffs that they've started to put on some of our stuff, including, by the way, sorghum and Milo when it comes to the trade. And as you know, Canada's being a huge producer of the sorghum and Milo. So to talk about all that and more, he's a researcher of livestock and dairy. He's a professor at the University of Missouri. He's Professor Scott Brown on the line with us. Scott, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great this morning, Andy.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show very much. So there is a heck of a lot going on right now when it comes to the trade, when it comes to tariffs, and when it comes to what we're in the middle of right now, when it comes to harvest season. And I have to say, first off, farmers, I don't know how they do it. The commodity prices have been extremely low for a long time now. We've gone from the average annual revenue after all the expenses for farmers from what was the average? Goes to $100,000 down to like $16,000 or $20,000. The prices continue to drop, and now we're seeing tariffs being put on. I got to ask you first, how do farmers even survive in today's times?
Well, I do think it's tough, and I often talk a lot about just the underlying risk many of them face, and it's risk that they really can't control. And whether we talk about weather providing that risk or just some of these trade issues that we face today, oftentimes these decisions are out of their hands. They really only have the option to control the things that they do every day in terms of how they produce a commodity and make sure they do it as efficiently as possible. But just so many things that really get outside of their control that affects their bottom line at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, farmers, I mean, it sounds like almost a private sector, small business kind of thing. But when it comes to the private sector itself, farming and agriculture really has nothing to do with the private sector because all of it's regulated by the Department of Agriculture and tied into international trade and commodity prices and all that. So really, a lot of the factors are out of the hands of the private sector, isn't it?
Well, I think it is. I often like to look at it this way. You look at a number of industries in this country, that their prices don't vary nearly to the extent that we see in agriculture. Think about a few years ago, you could have sold your corn crop for nearly $7 a bushel, and today we're probably talking more like $3.25 a bushel.
Wow.
That cut in half doesn't happen hardly in any other industry, and that's the very tough part of this. Of prices really outside your control. And it just depends on so many other factors, both supply and demand factors, that ultimately drive where these markets go.
Sure. No, absolutely. Before we get into some of the trade policies and in the state of that, let's talk about the harvest right now. We have our very own Mid-America Ag Network that we do our reports on from Texas all the way up to the Dakotas when it comes to wheat harvest right now. And from what it sounds like, the quality of it's been relatively poor this year on top of whatever else the farmers have to go through. But what have you seen from your tracking of this, and how do you think this is going to affect a lot of the economies in this area with not the best wheat harvest that we've seen?
Yeah, I think number one, when you look at just weather maps here for a second, certainly the southern part of Kansas, Oklahoma, into Texas, in a very serious drought situation right now, and that has affected wheat harvest. USDA gave us a current look at where we sit for the 18-19 crop here just this week, and wheat prices are actually starting to get a little bit of bounce in them as a result of, I think, that crop's less than maybe we anticipated going in. But it's very tough, and if this weather continues to unfold, it's only going to get worse for us as we think about harvest into this fall of things like milo and corn.
Boy, that's going to be a tough one. We're talking with Professor Scott Brown, University of Missouri. As we talk about some of those trades, and we've seen the tariffs being placed on Canada and Mexico, we're starting to pull out of NAFTA. We're starting to pull out of the TPP. How are pulling out of these different trade deals going to affect in a positive or negative way? And what do you think we may see down the road when it comes to some new trade deals?
Well, you hope at the end of the day we get trade deals that are better for U.S. agriculture. You look at Mexico here to begin with, and I go number one market for a number of our commodities, and a lot of that just has to do with the location of Mexico relative to where we grow commodities. The pork industry has certainly gotten very nervous with some of the news that Mexico is applying currently a 10% tariff on pork products. That will expand to a 20% tariff here. I believe it's the 5th of July that we see that go to 20%. All of a sudden, what's a very important market for us, seeing a 20% increase in cost, you kind of wonder about what happens to the trade side. I think there was a little bit of hope when we saw there was a 350,000 metric ton tariff rate quota available that the U.S. might be able to get part of that, but I think we've now figured out that isn't going to happen in the short run as well. So I worry in a year where, for example, in pork markets, we're going to be nearly 1 billion pounds higher in pork production in the United States, and we're could potentially lose one of our major markets for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Is it? I know a lot of farmers have been actually advocating, and even the Kansas Farm Bureau, I believe, or some different organizations, farm organizations, have tried to push for trying to remain in NAFTA because of some of these. Do you think that we need to stay in some of these or TPP, or do you think that it is going to be better to try and go off and do some individual trade negotiations with individual nations?
I think that gets to be a very tough question to answer only after we get to the end of the game. Do we really know what it means? I guess what I will say is that we certainly want the ability to trade. When you look at where the United States, the level of production of many of these commodities today, many of the consumers of these products set outside the United States, we want freer trade, and I think we can compete very well. When you see these tariff barriers being thrown up to products, ag products, we know that's just going to limit trade. And again, the growth in population, growth in income levels outside the United States should be very supportive for us to get additional export markets. I go, this is such a 0-1 kind of discussion that we're on from a producer standpoint, especially. Either we end up with a better deal, which is great for us in terms of U.S. agriculture at the end of the day, or we get shut out of markets. Mm-hmm. Think about producing commodities under that scenario where you really don't know which one we get. That very binary outcome adds a lot of uncertainty to the marketplace today.
Sure. Well, let's move to China, too, because I know they've been doing the same thing. They put on that hefty tariff onto sorghum and milo. Kansas really producing close to 50% of the nation's sorghum, milo, and I know that was a big issue that we're going to start talking about. Is that going to affect a lot of the market, or do you think that we could find new buyers for that and just say, heck with you guys, we'll find somebody else to sell this to?
Well, I think you will get all the above. So anytime we think about particular countries adding tariffs to our products, you do get a redistribution of where the trade goes. So sometimes we may find another country that's going to pick up that milo trade into China, and we might pick up the trade they left behind for some other countries. That's probably not going to leave us net unaffected, however. And when you look at China in particular, they can be extremely large in terms of their effects on ag markets. If you look at, they're the largest pork producer in the world and consumer, so they need a lot of feed. Mm-hmm. And we've been the beneficiary, I think, of being able to trade in things like milo and soybean meal, et cetera. That if the Chinese back away, it's certainly going to be very difficult for us. And so adding those tariffs do nothing but make us less competitive in those markets.
Sure. And I know you've kind of touched on this with each one of the situations between Canada, between Mexico, between China, but overall, having this different approach to trade as a whole by saying that we're going to put, as Trump puts it, as America first, by making sure that the trade deals are going to be beneficial to us rather than us losing out on the trade deals and the other nations benefiting more so than we are on these. In the long run, by us standing up and actually wanting to renegotiate some of these to have a better deal, do you think this is going to be better for us in the long term, or are we really putting a wedge in between a lot of our nations in relationships?
Yeah, so number one, I think we want someone to negotiate that plays poker with their cards facing them, not facing out, and so that can make us very nervous. However, and so we potentially do end up at the end of the day, if we're better negotiators, with a better agreement, and again, you give us more access to many of these markets around the world, and I think agriculture wins. It's the uncertainty of going through this process right now where, one day things look really positive. China's going to double their imports of U.S. ag commodities. To a few days later, we see tariffs being put in place. That uncertainty just makes it very difficult. So I think you look out there and go, there's a good potential longer term for us to gain out of this.
Sure.
But certainly in the short term, the volatility now, I think it's important to remind us that, we care about trade a lot, but we also care about what happens here in the U.S. in terms of domestic income growth, et cetera, jobs. I think I've heard President Trump talk a lot about bringing jobs back to the U.S. I think the strong economy we've seen here in the U.S. in the last couple of years in particular has been helpful to U.S. agriculture. We've consumed more meat products than otherwise might be the case at higher prices as a result of that domestic economy strength. And I think one could potentially draw some correlation between strength of that domestic economy and what's been happening in agriculture in particular.
Sure, absolutely. We're talking with Professor Scott Brown, University of Missouri. We got a few minutes left, but I don't want to miss this opportunity. I want to ask you about the Farm Bill as well. I know that's been a huge issue with the 2018 Farm Bill, and I have to say it's not surprising, but it is frustrating the fact that, the majority of the funding when it comes to the Farm Bill doesn't even go towards agriculture, but goes towards, the SNAP program and food stamps and that sort of thing. And then we haggle about crop subsidies and different insurance plans for farmers and that sort of thing. And then we talk about the majority of the conversation is, of course, the work requirements now for some of the social programs that are in the bill. And then, of course, we get to the partisanship of Democrats don't like that. Republicans do. And we need to start cutting some of the budget and some of the spending. And then it always seems to be that we throw in all the social programs. And then if you don't vote for it, then you apparently hate farmers because you don't want them to get crop subsidies. Where are we at with the Farm Bill now? And what do you think the end result may look like by the end of all this?
Yeah, Andy, you ask a really good question. So as we speak, Senate Ag Committee is trying to mark up their version of the Farm Bill right now. I would say when you look at what we saw from the Senate Ag Committee's original version here, very much a continuation of current policy with just some modest tweaks around the edges in many cases. In terms of the SNAP program that we see, I think the Senate doesn't have a lot of additional work requirements in their version. So we'll see where that comes on the Senate side. On the House side of this equation, we did see a House version voted out of House Ag Committee. It was voted on only by Republicans out of committee. It went to the floor of the House and failed here a few weeks ago. I think that had a lot to do, again, with stronger work requirements that were in the House version of the Farm Bill. We know that right now we're up against October 1st of this year is when the current Farm Bill expires. Mm-hmm. We either have to pass a new Farm Bill or do some type of extension. And it looks like to me the battle lines have somewhat been drawn in that, the Senate's a little more status quo in terms of making some modest modifications, but not major ones versus what we have on the House side. We've got to conference something between those two versions at some point in time. And I guess right now I'd lean towards it's going to look a lot like current policy as we move forward. And you've correctly identified when you look at Farm Bill spending today, nearly 3/4 of it is, in fact, nutrition program spending. And we'll have to wait and see whether that that changes with this version, but I don't expect major changes, I guess, at this point in time.
Is there any way that we can start breaking that up and say, look, if we're going to call it a farm bill, let's focus it on farmers and farming and agriculture and not focus it on the social programs and kind of divide the, I guess I'm living in a fantasy world trying to hope for that because they've loved to be able to tie a lot of these in. But as we start going back to appropriations bills and go to, 11 or 12 different appropriations categories to start working on the budget, would that ever be a possibility? Start breaking up SNAP and social programs from actual, aid to farmers and agriculture.
Yeah, so in fact, I think when you look back at the 2014 Farm Bill, especially on the House side, at the time, Chairman Lucas from Oklahoma passed what he called Farm Bill Only Farm Bill off the House floor and came back later to pass the nutrition side of that. So we have seen that happen in the past. I think one of the issues we have to be very careful about as we think about that strategy, we've got to get 218 votes off the House side to pass legislation, and as the number of members of Congress dwindle that have that kind of ag or farm background, it gets hard to lift a farm bill only with some of those members feeling like they don't have a lot of agriculture in their district any longer.
Sure. Well, it's the ever-changing dynamic on that one. It's an ever-going battle, and hopefully we can stay on the winning end of that to some degree. Professor Scott Brown from the University of Missouri, we're out of time, my friend. Great information. I really love it. We'd love to get you back on the show again later on.
Hey, just let me know when I can be helpful, Andy.
Hey, fantastic. I appreciate it very much. Got to take a break. 23 minutes past the hour. We'll open up lines to you when we come back. It's the Voice of Reason on a Wednesday. Stay here.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker, KQAM.
Welcome back into the Voice of Reason, 28 minutes past the hour. Appreciate Professor Scott Brown from the University of Missouri joining us talking about trade, tariffs, agriculture, and, of course, the Farm Bill. Can you imagine the political BS that goes into that, saying that, yeah, you know what, we love farmers, we love agriculture. You better vote for a Farm Bill where 80% of it actually goes towards social programs for individuals as opposed to farmers. And if you vote against it, then you actually hate farmers. Can you imagine the political attacks like that? That's what happened, by the way, to many elected officials. Not going to mention any names, but that's happened before. It's not an uncommon thing because that's the way they do in a lot of these. Like the omnibus bill. Vote for this because it's for the military. If you don't, then you hate the military sort of thing. It's absurd. It's time for us to get back on common sense normality just a little bit. Because, well, we just have to. Or else we're not going to survive for very long, are we? Bottom of the hour news coming up. It's open lines to you for the last half hour of the show. We got a lot more to get to today. Interesting news in California, interesting news in the primaries, and, oh, by the way, we will get you registered for the Ultimate Father's Day giveaway before the end of the show in this next segment, so stay tuned in for that. Get your name on there for KQAM's Ultimate Father's Day package. We'll have more details in just a bit. This is The Voice of Reason on KQAM. Stay here.
Republicans and Democrats accountable. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Hey, welcome back into the Voice of Reason, wrapping up the program. Today it is open lines to you for the last half hour of the show. What's on your mind? 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK, 36 minutes past the hour. We had a heck of a night when it comes to the primary elections last night. We have the rising of Donald Trump conservatism across the nation. And I'm curious on where we go from here. I mean, what could we possibly do more The progressives don't like us anyways. It's one of those things. Let me tell you a story, and I think I've told this before on the air. I was the chairman of the College Republicans at my university that I went to for a couple of years, and everybody hated us. I did not realize that at the time when I went to the university, but we were one of the more liberal colleges in the state of Ohio. And that's all right. I didn't know that until I got there, and then I realized how much they despised the college Republicans because we were the only conservative group on campus. There was no other conservative group on campus at all. There was the college Democrats, there was the Communist Party, there was the LGBTQ community, there was the Latino Student Union, there was a lot of different, and then there were a whole bunch of, the NCAA and a lot of other, or NAACP, and there was a few different organizations like that. So there were a lot of different groups on campus, but we are the one and only conservative group that was actually there, and we were hated. We were in the school newspaper usually once or twice a week. Now, I don't believe there's even a college Republican group on the university anymore. And if there is, there's not a very, very large presence. It kind of died off after we left. We were kind of at the height of it, which was really cool. I mean, we brought in some really cool speakers. We did some really cool things. We did a massive 9/11 memorial that we would do every year, and it was a really big deal. So we struggled through a lot of that, but we understood that we were hated on campus. So when you know that you're hated, you know that you're in the minority because everybody disagrees with you and doesn't like you, then what do you do? What do you do with that? Well, we understood that we were the minority, so we just went out of our way to try and annoy people. We kind of became the trolls like that we have on social media today. We were the trolls on campus. And we openly admitted it. Why? Because we knew that no one else liked us, so who cares what they think? We're going to do whatever we want to. We would do the Catch an Illegal Immigrant Day. We do the global warming beach party, middle of the wintertime, try and go out there playing Jimmy Buffett in shorts and pass the ball around saying, oh, yeah, Bush Light polar bears died, trying to do it in a very satirical way. Some people didn't get it. I mean, we did the Rush Limbaugh Day because as they were trying to silence Rush Limbaugh on the air, we went out and we blasted Rush Limbaugh right in the middle of the campus, and we were smoking big cigars. Not very many people liked it. And as they were walking by, Rush Limbaugh's a fascist, and it was just fun. We knew that we were hated, so we went out of our way to annoy them. That was our goal as not only to promote conservatism, but that was a icing on the cake, let's put it that way, that we got to enjoy. Right now in the elections, whether we're talking about the state elections, whether we're talking about the national elections, right now we're in that position. No matter what Donald Trump does, he is always hated by the media and the progressive Democrats, no matter what. He could cure cancer, and they would blame him for having cancer in the first place, and why he would actually want to do something like that. That's the point that we're at, and I never thought that we would get to this point. I never thought that we would actually get to the level of partisanship to where we hate someone so much on a personal level that no matter what they do that is good, then it's a terrible thing, and they have to find a way to attack it. I mean, we've been there kind of, sort of, but at the same time, it's one of those where if I was invited to the White House when President Barack Obama was in office, I don't necessarily like Barack Obama, but I would go there to respect the White House. I would respect the office of the presidency, and it would be really cool to meet the President of the United States, even if it was Barack Obama. We don't do that anymore. Now we have individuals that don't even want to show up, like the NFL, that said, yeah, you know what, not going to go. Not going to go. And then they get upset when he uninvites them. Really? Like, this is the stupidity that we live under right now. And this is why Democrats are going to lose in the election. This is truly why. Because they just don't get it. And nobody other than them get it. It's like one of those where you're in your own private club and people just don't understand what your private club's about. You wouldn't get it. The Dungeons and Dragons nerdy, a World of Warcraft type. That, what are you doing? You're wasting your life away. You're playing a game all the time. You just don't understand. Okay. Because you're so consumed with what you're doing that you forget to look up and look around. Which makes sense because right now we do that with our, mobile devices. We're so consumed with what's happening with the picture and with the tweet and with the social media and what somebody said and what you're saying about them and all the drama that goes along with that. And you got to reply to them because it's really important. And when they posted a picture, you got to see what kind of food that they're eating. And it's really, really big and it's really funny and really important. And then you stop to actually look up and look around you to see that you about ran into a pole. That's the consumption that the progressives have lived under since the time Donald Trump's gotten into office now. They're so consumed with anger and hatred and fear that they've forgotten to stop and smell the roses and realize, other than the ones that are actually advocating for that, other than that, everybody else is like, wait a second, hello, the economy's doing better. We just stopped a nuclear war with North Korea. We're denuclearizing them. You have more money in your paycheck. We're getting our trade deals back on track. We're doing some really cool things. Oh, by the way, we put the embassy in Jerusalem because we recognize Israel that way. Something that for the last how many years that so many presidents have promised that they do, and Donald Trump actually did it. We're doing it, which is why Republicans are going to win, which is why all the pro-Trumpers are winning in the primaries, which is why right now we're on the winning end. And yet we still have some Republicans that are still doing the panic mode of, oh, my gosh, I think I'm going to be in a wishy-washy district. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, man. It's time for that to stop. 316-721-8255. Let's go to the phones, get your take on the primaries from last night, the state of the Republican Party, state of conservatives right now, and where we go to actually better our own party. Let's go to the phones line at number 1. Good morning. What's your name?
Hi, Andy. This is Helen.
Helen, how are you?
I'm doing just great. Well, I'm rooting for the conservatives out there. I think this is what we need to help turn around our nation that was going backwards under Obama and the alt left.
For a long time, I would say that we even went backwards to a large degree under George W. Bush because he was not conservative; he was an establishment Republican.
Exactly. Well, and then you were speaking on the economy of Oklahoma,
yes,
and how it's improved, and partly because of oil and gas. Well, you've got all of these environmentalist chicken littles that are complaining that fracking and all that kind of stuff is causing earthquakes, or
give me a break.
But if anybody does their homework and their research, that from Oklahoma City all the way to Nebraska, which comes all the way through Kansas, we are living on the 1,100 million year old Humboldt fault line.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Jesus warned us in St. Matthew 24. The disciples asked him, "Well, what are some of the signs of the end of the world and His second coming?" Well, and St. Matthew 24:7, he says that there'll be earthquakes in diverse places, in many, many places. Well, here we go. And then he says in Revelation chapter 16, he's preparing the earth for the really huge, big earthquake that comes in Revelation 16, verse 18. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, flesh man was upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. He's preparing the earth for that huge earthquake.
Well, and we just kind of sit back and wait on that. And no kind of global warming control is going to be able to stop a major earthquake. Can you imagine remember the big earthquake that happened down in Haiti a few years ago? And everybody was talking about Haiti and the Haiti relief, and that's what everybody was trying to work on. And do you remember the interview from Danny Glover? He did a radio interview and said that the reason that there was an earthquake in Haiti was because of global warming and climate change. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've heard scientists say that great earthquake under the ocean that caused a tsunami.
Right.
They said it would take hundreds of nuclear bombs to have even come close to.
So what happened?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Creating that kind of an earthquake and tsunami.
And it was probably because of global warming and because we didn't turn off our cars in time.
Right. Well, it's so hysterical. It just kind of insults, a thinking person's intelligence to think that, oh my gosh, we're driving our SUVs and it's going to cause earthquakes and global warming and stuff like that.
Oh, it is. It's completely absurd. Helen, I appreciate it. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the global warming argument is completely ridiculous, especially when it comes to the fracking and when it comes to the earthquakes. And you're right, they've tried to say that Oklahoma, being a major oil and gas industry state, that they're contributing to the earthquakes that you and I feel here, and because of all the earthquakes and the increase of earthquakes in Oklahoma. And you know what? The minor ones, sure. Let's take claim for those. You know what? Any study that you've read, though, will show that if we don't do this in small margins like we're doing with the little mini earthquakes, then it would be one major earthquake all at one time, because it would build up the pressure and everything would slide at one time, and it would be disastrous. Instead of us getting into the cracks, being able to ease that tension and doing it in small margins. And there's nothing wrong with that. But on the grand scale, do you really think that climate change, that's putting CO2 into the atmosphere, is causing earthquakes? That is, again, shows the intelligence level of many of our celebrities like Danny Glover, who made that comment back during the Haiti issue. But then it also goes into the progressives that try and advocate for the whole environmentalist movement at the federal level, at the United Nations level, at the major national levels, or even at the state level. I mean, come on. If you go to California, which I like to pick on California, I know that we have a lot of listeners in California. How you found us, I don't know, but we appreciate that very much. Actually, on our podcast and the downloads of the podcast, the state of California is number 2 with the most downloads for the show outside of Kansas. So welcome aboard. And I don't know where you guys found the show, but we love it. But California is a nutso state when it comes to environmental protection, because you have your statewide EPA that's very powerful. You have insane amount of taxes to regulate that. You're driving away the dairy farmers in the state, because the dairy, for whatever reason, the cow flatulence from the cows is destroying your environment. Then you have your ordinances for the barbecuing, and you have your ordinance for this and that and the other, and it's absurd. You have one of the smoggiest states in the entire country, and you have one of the more stringent laws when it comes to the emissions of your vehicles, which, by the way, car emission tests in order for you to get your car license is still, I'm going to stick to this, one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of in my life. I don't get it. You need to have you pass the emissions test. You know what? The hell's wrong with my nice beater truck that gets 10 miles to the gallon, and when you hit the gas and the black smoke comes out of the back of it? I don't see a problem with that at all. And if that's the vehicle that I choose to drive, then by golly, it's a good old American vehicle that's going to last forever, and I'm going to stick to it. 12 minutes to the top of the hour. We got to take a break, wrapping up the show. This is The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
6 minutes at the top of the hour. Welcome back into The Voice of Reason. As we wrap up today, we got some calls on the line, so let's go right to them and sneak them in before the end of the show. What do you say? 316-728-8255, line number 1. Good morning. What's your name?
Corey.
Hey, good morning, sir. How are you?
I've been dying to get on somebody to say this stuff. Everybody's talking about global warming and climate change. Well, the climate's always changed.
Sure.
But more importantly, CO2 levels are at a historic low right now. In past ice ages, it has been many times higher. The amount of all this craze about, CO2 levels are going to kill us, is ridiculous, because we're actually too low and plants are suffering.
You're right.
And climate has always changed. It has a lot more to do with solar output than it does anything to do with anything man does. Volcanic activity is a huge driver for warm periods and cold periods.
Sure.
So I've got a chart I found that shows global temperatures from 2500 BC to what's predicted in another 30 years. And it has everything to do with solar output and very little and volcano activity. So the idea, though, that man is going to change the climate dramatically is pretty ridiculous, and it's all political, you know.
Of course. I mean, who's benefited from it? I mean, the only people that have benefited has been Al Gore trying to hype this up with his movies, and then the government and the progressives who say the environment's so bad that we need to create regulations, meaning that we get to tell you what kind of cars you get to drive. We get to tell the companies what kind of they manufacture.
It's all about control.
Exactly.
It's all about control. Al Gore's movie was full of inconvenient lies, including the scenes of huge sheets of ice falling off of glaciers were actually Hollywood CGI effects for a movie and had nothing to do with reality. So, you know,
and the polar bear population's actually
anything. Oh, polar bears. Well, remember, the Alaska pipeline was supposed to destroy the caribou, when in fact it gave the caribou a very warm area to winter and to mate. So there were even more caribou because of the Alaska pipeline that everybody swore was going to be disastrous, and it's been a good thing.
But remember, Corey, Bush lied, polar bears died. I mean, come on.
these things are so politically motivated, and people don't want to believe that. Well, why would they lie? Well, it has everything to do with getting more money and getting control of certain things, being able to pass regulations on businesses, and it's the attack on businesses that really bothers me more than anything, because I hear people screaming just recently, "Oh, we need to tax businesses more." And why don't people understand that businesses don't really pay taxes? Their customers do, or their employees suffer. So a tax on businesses, more corporate tax.
Exactly.
It's just more taxes on us.
More taxes
and
all over the place.
It's all about more control. And I hate to say it, but I'm so sick of the politics anymore because it's so corrupt. It's become totally ridiculous. And it was never great in the past, but we have become exactly what the founding fathers dreaded with the two-party system, and with I don't know why they didn't institute term limits on senators and congressmen a long time ago. But if we don't do that soon, that's going to get us. But it all ties into this whole global warming conspiracy thing, and everybody says, "Oh, you're just crazy." Of course, there's global warming. Well, actually, there hasn't been warming in the last decade, but that's why they're saying climate change. But climate's always changed. It will never stay the same. And not only that, we have been in a relative calm weather period for the last 150 years.
That is very true. I mean, we've gone from...
It's expected to change.
What was their argument before? Global cooling back in the day, then it went to acid rain, then it went to global warming. Now it's just climate change because we just don't know what's going to happen, but whatever's happening is man's fault, and it's all our fault for it happening.
We can't predict what the weather's going to do 10 days from now. How are we going to predict what it's going to do 10 years from now?
I love it. I love it. Corey, I hate to cut you off, my friend. We're out of time, but no, great points. Completely agree. That's it is an ever-going argument. All we got to do is find a way to wake people up a little bit because, some just fall for it. And I don't know why. Apparently the earthquakes are caused by me turning on my car. So guess what? I guess I'll have to turn on my car a couple more times today. This is The Voice of Reason. Appreciate all the phone calls, everybody. Have a great Wednesday.